Good morning, Lagos. Thank you very much for staying tuned here on Smooth 98.1 Smooth Breakfast here with Ayomiro SA.
And Valentine also.
And we have with us joining us for this Friday morning, Waji. Good morning, Waji.
Morning, Aya. Morning, Valentine. Good morning,
Good
Lagos.
morning.
Good to see you.
Thank
Waji
you.
is at the Corporate MC on Twitter. So corporate is spelled with a K. So the Corporate MC, please follow him and also engage him beyond the life of the show, of today's show. Right now, if you'd like to join the conversation, we welcome you very warmly. You can do that through our various media platforms, social media platforms, on Twitter, on Insta, on WhatsApp, and on YouTube as well. Our details are.
Of course, Twitter is Smooth981FM. The hashtag is FreshlyPressed981. On YouTube, you can just type in the search box Smooth981FM Lagos. You'll find us. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, WhatsApp number is 0809 4440981.
All right, let's go straight into our first story. Now, Punch newspaper has this one. Federal Road Safety Cause asks Saraki, that's the immediate former Senate president, ex-lawmakers to return number plates. Well, official number plates. They said it's the end of the tenure. He and 219 lawmakers should please return to the FRC what belongs to them.
Okay, so this is just what I don't understand. These number plates, why do you want them back? I don't understand. Are you keeping
Because
it?
they've left office.
No, I understand. No, I appreciate the discontinuation of the number plates.
Yes.
If they have an expiry
They
date,
do have an expiry
then
date.
they should no longer be valid to be used in the car. But what I don't
Yes.
understand is why you want them back, the actual return of it. That's just something that the story didn't go into.
Well, they said for record
keeping.
yeah, record
I don't know what
purposes.
that means. Are you going to keep a room of vanity plates and now say that this is something we issued to? Are you going to have a museum? Maybe that's what they're going to do. They want to do an FRSC
I
museum
mean,
and say that this particular license plate belonged to this senator or to this particular lawmaker. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's just one of those things. But bottom line, these things, you should not be using them past the particular dates that you
Yes.
have. But the point I wanted to make on this is that this is part of what the transition committee should be about, especially when you have individuals moving from one government position to another. If you're no longer an incumbent and you're being replaced by the newly elected official, part
Sorry.
excuse me, part of that transition committee should be able to capture these things.
Yes.
What are some of those handover documents, which should
Absolutely.
include things like, making sure that we have accountability and
All official
stock
property.
on official property and all those things. Whether it's from houses to cars
Yes.
to government issued things. Let's take stock of what was acquired while you were in office, so we can do a proper accounting of it. And maybe this should be one of those things included in this. So I don't know why it's now the role of FRSC. It should have been something that should have been captured by the transition committee to make sure that handover thing handled properly. But in my personal opinion, if you're not going to use it, then let the lawmakers keep it. Let it be a momentum of their time in office. They don't necessarily have to put it on their personal cars or on any other vehicle they're going to use from that point on, but let them keep it, and they can keep it in their homes or whatever the case may be. I don't really see the big deal.
Now, the FRC Public Education Officer, Corps Commander BC Karim, said that there was no deadline for them to return it, so
Which
they
is
can
also
take,
a problem,
yeah, so they can
right.
take as long as they want, but it's just that they want it back for record
Yeah,
purposes.
so that doesn't. I'm sorry, that doesn't add up. So why do you want it back? Because if someone says I'm going to take 2 years to return it, then
It's up to
it just
them.
becomes a relic. So
Yeah.
what's the point of it?
All right, thank you very much. Let's talk about Dar Communications and the NBC saga. So the court has okayed an out of court settlement. This day newspaper reports. I remember earlier this week we had a number of posts about this, a number of discussions around this. Just a summary about that. NBC had suspended Dar Communications indefinitely for what they said was continued breach of the broadcasting code. They'd done this a number of times, had been warned a number of times, and so they said, what, we're shutting down, well, not shutting down, at least suspending your license indefinitely. But now they're back operating, and they've agreed that they want to settle out of court.
Okay, so my only challenge with that is that, especially when you have a regulator involved, this is not necessarily a civil dispute. This was an action taken
I would
by
have
the
thought that too.
this is an action taken by the regulator for violation of your broadcast codes of conduct,
Yes.
right? So that's what I understand this violation to be. So, in as much as there's nothing wrong in settling out of court, I think it would be important for the amount, at least the ballpark figure of the amount, to be discussed in some detail. Why? Because this is the cost of silence. And I think it's important for other individuals who are operating within the space to get an understanding of, if we are to violate this code of conduct, as a precedence, we can refer to this particular case to say, okay, fine, even though there was an out-of-court settlement, Dark Communications had to cough up X amount of money for them to be able to get their license back and continue broadcasting, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's important for transparency purposes, especially when a regulator is involved, for such figures to be publicly declared, so that other individuals who are operating in the space can get a sense of what that cost of silence is. That's just the way that I see it. I don't see why it has to be quiet. Hopefully, at some point, it comes out so that everybody has a deep sense of what it is.
Now, don't forget, Waji, that Dark Communications also countersued. Well, they didn't counter because they weren't taken to court in the first. So they sued NBC for saying that their actions were illegal, they were unlawful, ultra-virus, null and void.
Well, that's a completely separate issue.
Yes, but the mediators who've come in have said that they should
drop it as part of the out-of-court settlement. Yeah. So there's just it's just a reactionary way for the things to keep going and keep things in the courts or whatever. But yeah, that's fine.
All right. Well, the court has asked them to come back to give the result or the outcome of the settlement. So, it's
I'm
not
sure it'll be
over yet.
pretty quick. There'll be some alerts here and there, and everybody will be happy. But they're back on, right?
But again, just to ask you, the wider issues around freedom of the press, do you think these issues have been sorted out or have been addressed?
No,
because it wasn't just about Dark Communications. A number of organizations came out, other press media organizations, that if this was done to them, it could be any of us next. So it's not just about settling out of court. It's the wider issues that this has raised up. Have these been addressed?
No. So I'm just saying no, because until we properly legislate the fourth estate in this country, which is the press, and give the press constitutional rights to operate with the freedom that they should, then we will continue to have this conversation. I always use this example. The only reason why CNN is not off air is because Donald Trump cannot take them off air.
Totally.
If he could, then they would have been off like a year ago. It's just that simple. But they are protected by the Constitution, which is why he literally cannot do that. But trust me, he is seething at the teeth because it's not his particular network of choice, because it is a disparaging party toward his own particular politics. And it happens. So let's not act like particular news outlets do not enjoy the incumbency of the ruling party of the day, because let's just be fair, Dark Communications did, because they were very, very outright supporters of the PDP. So now that you're no longer having that sort of grace with the ruling party, and then you're now on a Position News Network, these are unfortunately some of the things that have to happen. So to your particular point, Ayo, until the fourth estate is established properly in Nigeria and protected by our constitution, then we will continue to see these things happen. And that's just the blatant truth.
All right, thank you.
All right, MOH sent in a message, says some ex-lawmakers will use expired number plates in Abuja. Shegun says if National Assembly 1 or if NAS 1 plate number was used by Sarakia, Senate President, the plate number should be passed on to Lawal, the new Senate President. Please let the correct thing be done.
So there's no passage from one to another. When he was issued the plate number, it had an expiry date. He had a tenure, if I put it that way, from 2015 to 2019. So if he had been voted in, he would have had to renew it because he had expired by 2019.
No, but to the point being made is that it's still the office. It doesn't belong to Saraki.
The office, not the individual.
So the person who took over can still have the same exact number plate, not just the one that was previously issued. So I don't see the point of collecting that expired one back. Like when you renew your license plate, you still keep the old one. It's still the same numbers. So the NAS one would now belong to the ruling individual who's the Senate President.
I was just telling the person in terms of him asking him to return it so that the new Senate President can use it.
Okay. No. He doesn't have to return it. It's just a continuation.
Mark Zorin sent in this one. It says, are we sure DAR is the party paying the settlement? They've been asked to drop the case they instituted, meaning NBC negotiated for that to happen. That's not exactly true. Well, Kasim says it's an out-of-court settlement. I do not think they are obliged to make it public. If it went the normal route, then it would have been made known. The other things about freedom of speech is what should be made public.
No, the out-of-court settlement should be made public because it's a regulator involved.
Yes.
That's the point. Yeah. Okay.
And okay, we're not going to take this. It's not for this show. Chidoze from Lekki, though, sent in this one. It says, the law empowers NBC to close stations for owing license fees under Section 8 of the NBC law. If the other reasons for closing DAR communication fails, NBC can stand on this fact of their indebtedness. That is the reason why DAR Communications wants to settle out of court. No court will rule in favor of a debtor whose debt is not in dispute. For while Section 8A of the NBC law empowers them to withdraw license of stations who fail to pay the fees on the due date.
Or was that the reason that the regulator put out? Was that the reason?
Most likely. Well, one of the major reasons why they had the recent squabble was an infraction of a section of the NBC code.
It wasn't
In
about.
terms of
They didn't even give them an option of
regulatory.
fine. They had this of a fine. What they said was that they had repeatedly breached the broadcasting
Okay.
code,
So
so
they
they
got
had
them.
fined them
They
in the
got them
past.
on a technicality,
Yes,
basically.
yes.
Right, yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next story here on universities. Interesting story here from Michael Okwa, University of Agriculture in Umudiki, where varsity demotes 24 professors. New Telegraph has that. So some of the professors were demoted to associate professors and senior lecturers because, according to some anonymous sources, due process was not followed in promoting them. So, talking about a wider, in terms of corruption, incentive here and there to facilitate a promotion in our public services. Can you just quickly touch on this, Waji?
I mean, this is just a sad story for me because I've been talking about this war on education in this country, and
Yes.
this is what it now begins to speak to when you don't have any kind of seriousness or integrity or just lack of process in any higher institution, where you have a situation where professors are being made tenured individuals who do not have the credibility to now be in that position. Because a tenured professor should have made some publications, done some heavy research, have made some, just something to indicate that they are of that particular standing. And if these individuals do not belong to that, why were they promoted in the first place? So if the anonymous source is coming out to indicate that these were the reasons why, that it was a favor situation, corrupt practices, sharp practices, or however you want to look at it, now points towards why they became in. And it's fine that they were demoted, but let that be the actual reason that they were demoted. The university doesn't necessarily want to get into it. They're just saying that it's a placement issue,
Yes.
that these individuals were not placed properly, and they're just trying to make sure they're placed accordingly.
However, it's important to know that some of the professors who have been affected have been asked to show some of their
Which is a
certificates
further
for
issue.
citing.
Which
Yes.
is a further issue. So it goes back to the point, and that's why when Fela made that statement that teacher, please don't teach me nonsense. This is the issues that you have. You have people who are given that position to pass on knowledge and to shape the intellectual capacity of young individuals in this country, and they don't even have the tools, and that is criminal in my opinion. So I think credit to university for making a step in the right direction, but I hope it's not just done as a retaliatory, reaction because of one situation or another. Let it be a situation where we're actually cleaning house and just trying to get things right,
and not just maybe a new administration coming in,
exactly,
to
pointing fingers.
Thank you very much. Upsetting what was established on the previous one.
Right.
All right, let's move on to our next story here. We have no server for article to inspect. INEC tells Tribunal, says Guardian newspaper. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, yesterday told the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, PEPT, that it had no server to be inspected by the People's Democratic Party and that its candidate, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, over the conduct of the February 2023 presidential poll. Are we or are we not going to see the back end records of the server that was said to contain information that would prove that PDP indeed won the presidential elections recently concluded?
Okay. Okay. All right, watch it. Now, if you're going to make suppositions that you have information that there's a server that exists that indicates that you won an election, how did you get access to that information? I think that's just the starting point before I get into the validity of what is being said. I just want to know, did you come forward to indicate that you had access, you saw this, somebody told you? Did you hack it? I don't know. Did you call up some Russians and do
there's a phrase for that. I mean, there's a
Which
phrase
is
to
what?
describe, you having access to something that you're not authorized to have
Right.
access to.
Exactly. What is that phrase, Valentine?
Unauthorized
access. So,
AKA hacking.
so this story is very confusing, and I think it's just one of those things where you see a defeated candidate just clutching at straws and trying to remain relevant. I don't really get the point of this whole thing. You're indicating that based on the information that you have, the servers indicated that you had 18 million votes in contrast to the APC 16 million votes. So because of that, therefore, they should now produce their servers. But INEC are telling you that we don't have any servers. So my question now becomes, where is this information coming from? And why are you, even if you were to go to a court of law, how do you submit this particular exhibit? It has to be based on some kind of fact. So I just find it interesting when people say, I have information that you did X. I'm like, okay, well, how did you come about that information? And I think that's a fundamental component we need to focus on, because we can't just take, because what, now, let me tell you the irresponsibility of this, right? People without proper deductive reasoning will look at this and now say, hey, I told you, PDP have information that they had 18 million votes, APC rigged the elections. I'm like, hold on,
I'm
now.
missing the point of
you're missing the entire point.
Yeah.
How, if indeed it is something credible,
Mm-hmm.
then let's debate it. Let's put it forward. Let's challenge INEC. Let's take it through the proper due process, and whatever the outcomes may be, may be. But you can't just come out and make these suppositions, just blanket statements, and expect people to take you seriously. And you have to be a lot more careful with your statements. But on the larger context, Buhari has gone through the inauguration. We've celebrated Democracy Day. We're moving on. What's the point of this? I mean, do you want to drag it out for how long?
All right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Abigail sent in a message on WhatsApp. Abigail seems to agree with you. She says, INEC says it has no server. I thought these same people asked the DSS and police to arrest some people for hacking into their server.
Exactly.
This is indeed a government that has elevated lies and falsehood to an active state.
So in what in effect, INEC is coming out now to say that they don't have a server. But when PDP initially made this accusation, they said, "Oh, someone hacked in." So which server did they hack into?
That's the second problem. Yeah. So
yeah.
So I mean,
that's
how do you
the
make
point
reference
about
to something that
and
presumably
never
does not
exists.
exist?
does not exist. But to Aya's point, they highlighted the fact that they were hacked. So maybe it wasn't a server, maybe it was this. I don't know. Once again, it's the irresponsibility of the entire thing. It's just this cacophony of just mess that people just get themselves into when they don't analyze properly.
Okay.
All right. Thank you
And
very
we have
much.
more messages here. This one says, this one's from Emeka. Emeka said, good morning, guys. Did the professors promote themselves? Is meant to be a template for promotion, which includes publication of academic materials over the years. We need to reach out to those concerned to get a balanced view, and then reacts to the INEC issue, saying that INEC said they do not have servers. Now, that is not a problem. We should use the Bellingat method and use digital footprints to prove it. Okay, so tracking.
All right, thank you. A number of people are reminding us that INEC did say at one point that they were hacked, so that they're going to go after those who hacked them. So it's interesting to see that. So
They no longer have servers.
which one is the lie? The fact that you're going to go after those who hacked, or the fact that you don't have servers?
Perhaps they're saying there's no server connecting all the computers, so they act remotely.
All right.
I can't.
We wait
It's
for
so
this.
confusing.
Yes,
I
we
do
wait
not
for this to
understand.
unfold.
Yeah. So let's move on to this next one, talking about customs. Now, from Premium Times, the Nigeria Customs Service said on Thursday that its revenue generation has increased to the region of 5.5 billion naira daily. And they said this is largely due to automation of the customs operations at the ports. Your thoughts on this, Waji?
You always hit a nerve whenever we talk about these ports, and specifically Apapa.
Yes.
And I want people to pay attention to what is not being said.
Mm-hmm.
What is not being said is that the situation on that Ijora Causeway, Surulere, Tinkan, Apapa, Marine Bridge, that entire place that has been an absolute mess for over 5 years now continuously, will never ever go away for this specific reason. Those trucks being on those trucks being on the bridge, lining up, queuing up endlessly, and the port authorities and terminal operators collecting these kind of revenues from people waiting for days and days and going through the systems, etc., etc. This is the output of it. Okay, those guys are not just there causing havoc. It is part of a revenue generating scheme for the Nigerian Ports Authority. Yes, they can gladly hide behind automated systems, etc., to show that we are making more money. But you're making money as a result of the ensuing situation of trucks, 6,000 trucks,
because
have been lying up there for years.
Waji, I thought it was counterintuitive, saying that you have your systems automated, hence you've generated this amount of funds, but we still have the gridlock in Apapa.
Thank you very
much. We
much.
still have problems with the call-up system.
Thank you very
We're
much.
still establishing the fact that the ports.
So what does this tell you? So that's why I said pay attention to what's not being said. 5.5 billion is, I believe it. I firmly believe that's how much they're raking in terms of collecting fees, whatever the case may be. But what is not being said is that it's a direct result of the lock jams and the gridlocks that we are seeing. That's how these things work. You cannot just remove the two and just say that, because if you're implying that we have these automated systems, et cetera, then you should not see the kind of cues that you see. You should not see the kind of situations that you see. And what really, really, really gets to me is when you have all these task force come up with these mandates and ultimatums that the truck should get off the bridge in 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, and 6 minutes. You now have a situation where those trucks just like, well, this is what we're going to do. There's money involved and it happens. And then you now have counter reporting, people now sharing posts at night or 2 o'clock in the morning on a particular road that indicates that there was no truck, there was no this, there was no that. But people who live in that area know what they're going through on a daily basis. The security challenges, the health implications, the psychological implications of sitting and navigating your way through that traffic, going against one way, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just absolute nonsense. And they need to stop saying these things because livelihoods and lives are highly affected by it.
All right, Audrey, thank you. Let's move on now to discuss the reaction, still trailing on the conversation around Democracy Day as opposition bashes Senate for rejecting a motion to discuss Buhari's speech. So this was brought up on the floor of the Senate yesterday when a member that her name is Estefanus Gang, representing PDP in Plateau State. She invoked Order 52 on the floor of the Senate and asked that the debates or the presenter's speech that was given by Buhari on June 12th and presented on the floor of the House for debates. Now, the Senate, the head of the Senate, Senate President, actually, called her speech shots and said that wasn't put into voice vote, but the nays had the more,
The nays had the floor.
a louder voice, yes.
Okay, so this is what I don't understand. What are we debating? Did President Buhari make any policy statements or any legislative statements in his speech that indicate that things need to be debated? Or you want to debate the merits of his speech itself? I don't get it.
What seemed to get the most attention and really
Was what the 100 million
exactly
kids are.
saying
Okay,
that
so
it will take 100 million. They will take, the federal government will take the 100 million Nigerians from poverty to prosperity in the next 10 years.
Okay. So
Considering a few
you want to
factors
debate?
put in place.
You want to debate what?
Maybe his plan to actualize that within that period of
That's
time.
worthy of a debate. I'm not
Still
even
begs the
trying to be
question.
funny. I actually don't know. I'm just curious to know what the debate is about, because the president has made a visionary statement as to where he wants to see poverty go in the next 10 years. And you have a problem with what? So you see, this is my issue with,
Which is probably why the Senate President
shut it down. Okay,
immediately.
fantastic. I just wanted to make sure, because I always get very confused.
Because
when
right now
things
the
like this
opposition is
happen.
regarding it as, okay, saying, first of all, they are reacting to the fact that the Senate President shut it down,
Yes.
Assuming that, or alleging that,
I'm sorry,
it's a bad omen for the future of the Senate because they have more majority.
Yes,
on
that's
the line
what.
of
That's
APC.
kind of how democracy works. Majority trumps any kind of minority aspirations. So, sorry, you're caught up in your feelings. You need to get out your feelings.
Very interesting.
Sorry.
Let's take some more messages here. This one's from Vitalis from Lekki. He says, Ogawaji, on the issue of INEC server, you got it wrong, though. INEC threatened to sue people that hacked.
How did I get
their
it wrong?
server.
I never said that. They didn't say
It's
that.
how come the same INEC is denying the existence of any server? I recall at certain points where they were discussing the issue of the APC in Zamfara State. The Supreme Court.
You're very correct. I never. Let me just clear the point. I never said that INEC didn't have. I agree with that 100%. What I am saying is that the people who are going around making the allegations that they have access to information, that they need to release servers that shows those votes, I want to know how you had access to that information. So I never said INEC didn't. INEC never made a point about servers in the past. No, I completely agree with that. My point is I want to know how the contesting party who made that statement, how they had access to that information. That's all I want to know.
Yes, that's the question. But his message actually continued to say, is that allow the court to ask Atiku which server he got his information from.
Boom.
I recall at that time, right after the Supreme Court judgment of 24th May 2019, INEC went further to say they had shut down the server.
Right.
So it's safe to say that right after that, there was no server, to be considered in
Okay, so let's go back to that point very quickly, Valentine. So does that now mean that by INEC saying that they've shut down that server on that particular date, their point, does it have some validity that they no longer have servers? I'm asking both of you.
That on
Yeah.
see that's allusion or suspicion or whatever you want to describe it as. It was an allegation by the PDP, so it just goes back and forth,
Thank you. Right.
ever since. Well,
No, but I think the main contention from the story earlier on is that I mean, Atiku is in court to ask or to pray that he's able to access the server to show proof of what he's claimed, and obviously the defendants are saying, well, no, it's outside the jurisdiction of the courts, it shouldn't be allowed, and then INEC comes in to say that, oh, actually, even if you wanted to search, there's nothing to check. There's nothing
Because
to,
we've shut down the
yeah, we
servers.
shut it down.
it's non-existent.
So
Marcel Odibo says server in any tech that offers services to be consumed. It could be a web server, database server. What INEC could be saying is that we do not have servers connected to the electoral voting process.
possible.
I obviously will remember, and we still know that many Nigerians were criticizing INEC for using a manual voting system, and
We don't have electronic voting.
collation of results and all
Yeah, we
that.
don't have electronic voting.
Let's move on very quickly now. Discuss the story about the EFCC. They said they are set to clamp down on illegal use of POS machines. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission said yesterday it will begin to clamp down on fraudulent use of point of sale machines across the country. They made this announcement in Benue State at a meeting. The acting EFCC chairman, Ibrahim Magu, charged the banks to ensure proper monitoring and strict compliance by those to whom they issue POS machines. Your thoughts on this?
Well, it's a pretty straightforward situation, and I think this is where the banks need to step up their KYC. So if you're going to offer, I think you can only really offer businesses a POS machine. So you need to dig deeper with regards to understanding who those businesses are, what they're about, what kind of business they're in, where they're located, the inflows that are coming into those particular accounts. So that way you can go ahead and put stopgap measures in place before the EFCC actually have to step in. So I think the banks have a huge role to play here. They need to be a lot more discerning with the issuance of these POSs, so the businesses that they're issuing it to, and they need to make regular reports to the EFCC that when they flag just very, very weird looking and just strange looking transactions. So I think the banks need to step up. I don't know why this is a big issue, because banks are pretty good with these kind of compliance and risk situations. So I don't know why it's a challenge, unless it's something we're missing. But if EFCC is making the statement, then I think this should now be on the banks to step up and just do a lot more work with regards to digging deep to find out who these guys are.
Especially considering the fact that it's a possibility that some people that may be encouraging this fraudulent activity
No, exactly.
may be found in-house.
In-house, yeah. So, but the banks do have very strong compliance units that can track these things relatively easy. So it's just a question of them to step up and just do a lot more work, and then now come out and be a lot more communicative to EFCC and to the public so that people know.
Right.
Thank you, Waji.
Now, Dami says from WhatsApp, reacting to the story about the debate in the House of the President's speech, they could demand that the President breaks down his vision into annual milestone. It's in order to avoid accountability that Buhari stated 10 years. We want to know how to measure progress between 2020 to 2023. That could be the purpose of the debate.
I agree, but we're assuming, so we don't know. So that's why, and I think when we use the word debate, and but more importantly,
so look at it from the point of KPIs. Now, key performance index for
yes, but I want to hold on. It's
for
two
their
things.
mandate
It's two
and
things,
what they
right?
want to
And let's
achieve.
be careful here. This was a Democracy Day speech, not an inauguration day speech. Okay.
There was no
But he
inauguration
didn't give
day.
us an
Okay, well,
inauguration
fine.
speech.
Okay, this was a Democracy Day speech, and it's there to celebrate and talk about Nigeria in 20 years of continuous democracy, etc., etc. So I think, just take it as a passionate statement that the president was making, everything else, and everything doesn't have to now be measured according to some metric. That's just how I see it. And trust me, this is me talking about Buhari now, so I'm just being very objective here, that it was a Democracy Day speech, and you should take it in the spirit of the occasion.
All right. Thank you very much, Wadi. You've been a soldier this morning. Honestly, I feel like you went to war, but you've come out hopefully standing strong and still standing. But thanks a lot to all those who sent in messages and watched on YouTube. Don't forget subscribe to our page so that when the video goes up, you get a notification to watch. But Wadi, you can find him at the Corporate MC. A lot of people are coming for you, but so let me give him a Twitter handle. I hope you're ready.
You find me in every corner of Upside in the Truth. All right, that's where I'll be.
Let's continue the conversation offline, online, on Twitter at Smooth981FM. Please use the hashtag freshlypressed981. Keep your pictures coming, keep your facts coming through as well. We're still here. It's a Feel Good Friday on Smooth 98.1. Go on for a music break, enjoy some smooth music, calm down, and then when we come back, the locker room with Tega in a few minutes.